So in this segment, we're going to be discussing Max Rose's friend Ben Habib blaming immigration and the EU on the situation in France. We'll be talking about the riots and stuff in France, after I've played this clip, because it's a lot more nuanced than what the intellectual titan Ben Habib has put out here. Rare miss, I think, from Max's friend Ben.
Some of the footage that I've watched over the course of the weekend.
Oh yeah, and we've got the guy who says you can grow concrete. I think that's this guy on the left.
Quite troubling, It's always being sort of drilled into us that there's a problem with the French police's relationship with some of the migrant communities, some of the ethnic minority communities in France. But it was already beginning to spread to Belgium. But an awful lot of these, rioters seem to be carrying makeshift guns. They seem to have quite serious weaponry. This is not just any old stone-throwing riot in Tottenham.
It's not just down to, these being immigrant communities or whatever. It's down to these areas being incredibly underprivileged. It wouldn't matter if this area, I think, was white or whatever. This is, I did a bit more research on this, and this area is incredibly deprived. And seeing a kid get shot, whether he was in a gang or not, it was a routine traffic stop. He was shot with a non-lethal weapon in his chest, and it apparently caused a heart attack, which is nuts considering the kid looked really young. He looked like he was 17 or 19 or whatever. Newsflash, people that age don't typically have heart attacks.
This is almost paramilitary style.
It is, and it's not restricted to any one location. It's right across France, all the way from Marseille all the way up to Calais. Yeah. France is in real trouble. And
I want to say it's not really new for France, because I think there's the Gilets jaunes were causing absolute riots in France, literally. But this is not a new thing for France to have riots. But it's very troubling to see kind of the cause of this one. I think there were riots and things like that over Macron raising the pension age, I think, to 67. I'm going to say, and I'm not surprised people rioted over that. But this one is different. It feels like the one in the UK where that dude Mark Duggan was shot by police.
Of course, police shouldn't, shoot anyone, right, frankly, for a traffic indiscretion. But nor should there be this level of response to it. You can't imagine this happening in the United Kingdom at the moment. And I hope and pray that it'll never happen in the United Kingdom. And whatever issues I've got with Macron and the French over the way they treated the United Kingdom over Brexit and over their failure to get a grip, for example, of the boats coming across from France.
Again, France can't really stop people leaving their shore. If you see a bunch of people on a boat, what are you going to do? Stop them? For what? They haven't really committed a crime yet.
No one would wish this on France.
No.
This is one of the greatest nations in the world.
Are they, though? Are they one of the greatest nations in the world? I don't know. Best pastries, though, or some of the best pastries.
And look at it. It's completely collapsing in on itself. And a large part...
It's not really collapsing in on itself, is it? I've seen videos of, kind of civilians trying to protect their own areas. But, this is not... We're not heading into failed state territory. Let's be honest now. It's not collapsing in on itself. These are rioters with Molotovs and other things like that. These are dangerous weapons here. But we're not entering a civil war. This is not a collapse. This might be more than a Tuesday for France, sure, but it's not a collapse.
Part of this might, people won't like to hear it, but a large part of this is unbridled immigration.
Of course it is.
And the EU is squarely responsible for it.
All right, so if we look at these communities, right, I don't think these are predominantly European... I don't want to do anything racist here, okay? But the EU controls kind of EU-based immigration, right? The EU doesn't control non-EU-based immigration, okay? And I'm going to say that these are... I'll probably get bad for this one, but these are non-EU immigrants, which the EU has nothing to do with. These are massive socio-economic problems within France itself. And again, we'll talk about this article actually, because it's quite interesting what these people had to say. But what he's talking is absolute nonsense. It has nothing to do with the EU. Once again, Ben Habib, swing and a miss.
Tweeted about this over the weekend. The EU believes in pooled sovereignty. What that means is giving power to Brussels and stripping it away from member states.
That's not even what pooled sovereignty would mean. It would be they pool their sovereignty together. That's not even what that means.
But if that's what you believe in, you wish to diminish the importance of member states, nation identities are lost, you become one big melding pot.
That's not even what's happened, though. that's the thing. Like, what's happened is a massive riot has broken out because of this area, which is incredibly underprivileged, and I think it's broken out in other parts, kind of in France and Switzerland, which are geographically very close to each other, obviously, and it'd be from different communities who are probably underprivileged as well, and are just sick of the situation they're in.
Which is what the Schengen zone is, which also means, naturally, that immigration runs riot, because if you don't care about nation states, you don't care about national identities, you don't really care about whether people
it's not even true. Schengen, like, to live in a country, you still need to get residency. It's illegal. Like, if you're from Belgium and you just move to France for long term, like, you're still meant to get residency. When you go there, if you're going to live there long term, how enforced it is, I don't know, but there are still residency rules. Like in Belgium, if you don't have a job within 3 months, they can deport you. It's absolute nonsense what he's saying. He's talking about as if the EU is one state when it's not. It's a collection of states.
Immigrants or born naturally in the country, or whether they're French citizens, British citizens, or wherever they come from, you cease to care about the national identity, and that is a real problem. We've got to recognise that whilst we need to remain a welcoming country, a tolerant country.
So enough of that. The guy's just an absolute moron. So this is from Amin, I'm going to say. He was 17 when his brother's body was badly burnt. His body was recovered from the boot of a torched car. He said, quote, "My brother unfortunately fell into drugs early," end quote. He says his face impassive as well as glances up at the scruffy high-rise flats that surround us. Sorry about that, reading's just completely gone. He says, "We sit talking about his brother who had trafficked drugs before his murder in one of Marseille's most notorious neighbourhoods." And this could have happened anywhere. This could have easily happened in London, where we have a massive drugs problem as well. Amin, now 19, grew up here in Fraz-Vallon, an estate, a vast, deprived social housing project in the north of the city, which is blighted by gang and drug-related violence. This is what I'm talking about here. It's not down to immigration. This is down to socio-economic factors. Not far away, a couple of young men lounge on a wall. Drug dealers work openly here in the harsh afternoon sunlight. This is an area where police don't care. He says trafficking, so drug dealing, is a seductive choice for children who grow up here and have little money and even fewer prospects. Again, this is something we see in the UK with county lines, where kids essentially are, kind of brought into drug dealing or forced to do drug dealing across the country. They'll take drugs from, say, London to Manchester. He says, quote, "There are no other options. There are no companies coming here and saying we'll pay you more than minimum wage. Ellipses. Here, people are supermarket cashiers, cleaners, or security guards. We can't be judges, lawyers, or accountants," end quote. And that's the point. Is there's no career prospects for the people living here. It doesn't matter who you are. If you live in this area, you will struggle to make it in life because there's nothing here for you. That's the problem. You either move out, you're either lucky and you escape this area, or you're stuck here in a cycle of crime potentially. He wasn't surprised by the riots, which were particularly bad in Marseille. Businesses here, including a gun shop, were vandalised and looted, and a man aged 27 was killed. And I don't think gun shops are legal in France. Prosecutors say, they used a non-lethal weapon on him, but again, he suffered a heart attack, and young people don't suffer heart attacks not that often. It's very rare. Maybe it was stress induced. He maybe got shot in the chest and he got shot in the heart. But it feels very much like when Ian Tomlinson in the UK got whacked, literally got whacked by the police, and they claimed he died of a heart attack, which again, I never bought that excuse. The family of the person who died under police custody or was killed by the police, depending on how you want to phrase it, they've asked people to stop the riots. Again, it's a well-known area of being deprived. Last year there were 31 drug trafficking relating murders in Marseille. This year there have been 23. 2/3 of the victims were under the age of 30. So you can see what you have is essentially not just drug dealing, but also a drug war in this area, where you have different gangs probably vying for influence. And again, it's not something unique to France because of these communities with migrant backgrounds. This is a thing we see in other cities in the UK as well. I've seen it. It's nasty. If you grow up in one of these areas, you're lucky if you avoid it, I'll be honest. 2 years ago, Emmanuel Macron promised to fix Marseille. He announced €5 billion, a plan to tackle crime and deprivation in the city. He came back to the southern port city just before the riots to reinforce his commitment, saying, quote, "Everything has to move faster," end quote. Macron said at the beginning of a 3-day trip in which he visited sites of regeneration projects, including a police station, a school, a prison, and a hospital. And again, what he's got to do is he's got to deal with the crime, and he's got to create well-paying jobs. It's the only thing they can do. They have to give people an alternative to crime, but he's not going to do it. You know, Amin, who met Macron twice, lost his faith, saying, quote, when Macron comes, he comes to make announcements, not to listen, end quote. And essentially, he's saying he comes to make statements, to look good. At least in my opinion, what he's saying is Macron comes to this area to make statements, to look good, but he won't solve the issues there. The mayor of Marseille, Benoît Payan, I'm going to say his name is, acknowledged that he acknowledged he needs to bring the city together. And I think this is a dude who, he was attacked by the rioters. His wife was attacked by the rioters. They ran up on his house. He was incredibly lucky to get away from it. But the situation is that, you know, there was a few days there where no one was safe, I think, in this city. No one was safe, and the mayor said, quote, for too long my town has been divided between people who are poor and people who are not, between those who are considered by the public authorities and those who are not, end quote. It's supposed to be a fundamental French value, but here egalite is now an ambition, and it goes against one of, you know, France's key tenets, which I think is liberty, fraternity, equality, which I'm not going to say in a French accent because I don't want to get beaten up in the comments by French people. But what you can see here, this is not down to immigration, not really. This is down to an incredibly deprived area, which again, if you grew up in this area, you'll be incredibly lucky to avoid crime. I'm lucky I didn't grow up in such an area, but I have seen people, you know, kind of go into crime. You know, I don't live in some nice walled city, but I don't live in a place like this where there's no prospects. I'm very lucky in that regard, and I think most of the audience will probably be very lucky to avoid this sort of stuff. But you know, you have a quote from a resident saying it's like a bin. It's like living in a bin here. It's not safe. So yeah, you know, incredibly stupid for Ben Habib to blame the EU or blame anyone else apart from I think the French who've created these areas which are incredibly deprived. And again, this is not something unique to France or unique to this area just because they're people of migrant backgrounds. It'll be cities, it'll be in a lot of different cities where there's no prospects, there's no career prospects. The only prospects you have are crime. Maybe you can become like an athlete, you know, a footballer or a boxer or something like that. You know, maybe that's a way out, but it's very rare you see those. Most likely what will happen is they'll get drafted into crime and they will probably die young, let's be honest now, because these aren't just drug dealers. There's drug wars that happen in these areas. If you get caught in someone else's turf, you'll get beaten up. It's rough out in these streets, I'll be honest, and I'm talking about these streets specifically, and I do feel incredibly bad for the people who grew up here in these areas, because there's not much they can do to escape a life of crime. Like you said, you know, they can be cashiers, cleaners, or security guards. They can't be judges, lawyers, or accountants. They can't have, you know, white-collar jobs. They're stuck in the bottom rung of blue-collar jobs. There's nothing wrong with being a cashier, a cleaner, or a security guard. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But when you live in these sorts of areas, when you're trying to escape poverty, these jobs don't pay enough. They don't pay enough for you to get out, and that's what's tragic. So for, you know, I'm gonna probably have to stop saying Max's friend Ben because of this man's absolutely unhinged statements. It's more a joke on my part, anyways. But this situation in France, it's not down to immigrants or anything like that. It's socioeconomic factors. And for Ben to try and blame migrants and blame the EU, it just shows you the man's a fraud. Honestly, especially for a guy with an immigrant background himself here, to attack other migrants is just sad. But, you know, that's common for conservatives, apparently. But anyways, I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. A genuinely painful video to do. Just looking at the situation in France, you have Macron blaming, you know, video games and stuff like that. I'm like, bro, get a handle on this situation. Like, you're meant to be the leader of the French. You know, this is a very proud country that has a strong history in itself within its fundamental policies or fundamental ideals, which you are not upholding. And, you know, France has had a lot of riots this year, and it is stable. This is normal for France to an extent. But, yeah, these are things like, you know, Macron could have avoided. But I think with this one, I think this was unavoidable based on the fact that it's just this place looks like a tinderbox. You know, anything can set it off. And it was, you know, a kid dying, being murdered, or, you know, manslaughter, whatever. I don't know. We'll have to wait for an actual autopsy, not some bogus police one, because I've seen those before of what happened to this kid. You know, why he died in this traffic stop, because it's meant to be, these things are meant to be routine. But I'm waffling a lot here. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, support the channel on Patreon if you can, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.